Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Robots and Red Tape. As always, I'm your host, Nick Schutt. Really, first want to thank everybody out there who's listening. Really appreciate your support and you taking the time out of your busy day to listen to us chat about all things AI. Happy to have Renee Meisel and Beverly Rich here with me today. We had the opportunity to chat with both of them a little bit before Legal Week this year, and a little bit at Legal Week, but we were kind of like two ships, or three ships in this case, passing in the night. Although I'm sure you two spent a lot of time together, and for everybody out there that hasn't had the opportunity to meet you guys yet, do you mind just telling everybody a little bit about yourselves, your backgrounds, kind of how you got here, and your organization?
Sure, Nick. So I'll go first. And first of all, thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate talking about something that is really near and dear to our hearts, which is technology and legal and that intersection. So I'm Renee Meisel. I'm CEO of UnitedLex. And for those that don't know, UnitedLex is what we call an alternative legal service provider. So your listeners may be familiar with law firms. I think when people think of the legal space, that's what they think of. There's a whole industry that's grown up of people who for decades now have been thinking about how do you make the practice of law more efficient by weaving in technology, process, these kind of business concepts into law. And so that's what we do. And I'm actually a lawyer by training. I went to law school, graduated, worked as a litigator at a big law firm, and then worked in-house as in-house counsel for a very long time before I made the switch to being more of a business person, growing companies in this ALSP space.
Awesome. Thank you. Beverly, what about you?
Yeah, thanks. Also echoing Renee, thanks so much for having us on, Nick. Really excited to chat with you. I am VP of AI and Product Innovation at UnitedLex. I joined UnitedLex from a law firm, a really large multinational labor and employment law firm where I was practice innovation counsel. And so similar sorts of things, what I do at UnitedLex versus and what I did at this law firm is kind of bringing, thinking about AI strategy, thinking about innovation strategy, thinking about what that means at the next level down. So how are you bringing AI to internally and then also to client facing work as well? At UnitedLex, we just launched our AI advisory services, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, a little bit later. But it was kind of, born out of seeing where the need was in the market for lots of different people in legal, kind of thinking about where they are in their AI journey and how we at UnitedLex could help them move them along, help them get a sense of where they're at, and then help them move forward. That's also been my interest. I started out my career as a lawyer and then went back to school, got my PhD in strategic management. I was in academia for a while as assistant professor of entrepreneurship and strategy at the University of Utah. And all my research there focused on the economics of innovation, in particular, the use of AI in the legal industry. So I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I'm excited to dive into some of these topics a little bit more.
Absolutely. No, really appreciate that. Appreciate your both of your backgrounds and learning a little bit more about UnitedLex. Also, really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to be here. This is super fun. I always enjoy having conversations with folks, especially folks that are not that didn't come up as technologists, and having conversations with them around AI and AI innovation in highly niche industries. And law is a very niche industry. As you look at it, huge industry, but niche. With a lot of strict requirements and a lot of regulations around it. And as we all heard at Legal Week constantly, and we all hear all the time, everybody these days is talking about LLMs, large language models, and agentic solutions, and agentic AI as different ways to solve problems. And to clarify for everybody out there, you guys don't actually build your own products at the moment. You're helping people implement products to other people's products and making their organizations better and more efficient. So what percentage of AI, in your guys' estimation, really in the legal space, what percentage do you think like LLMs and agents really represent as far as like value and use cases?
Let me just speak generally about AI and kind of its adoption in the legal
Okay.
space. And I think Beverly's probably better positioned to go talk about specifics. But I mean, I think AI and automation, when I think about agentic, I think of automation. It's kind of the next evolution of automation. And the AI LLMs we're seeing are really just kind of an evolution of the machine learning that we've seen, used in the litigation space for a long time. So I would say that, we've been adopting these types of technologies, and it keeps evolving over time. Heavily has been uh, embraced in the litigation space for a long time. And I think it's in, maybe more recent years, and I say years, it's probably a good number of years, that it's really been adopted in the contracts, intellectual property, some of these other spaces that these kind of machine learning and predictive concepts are coming into play. But I think, Beverly, do you want to add a little color around percentages and kind of what you're seeing?
Yeah, I think the industry is at a really interesting, the legal tech, legal AI industry, to clarify, is at a really interesting spot. A few years ago, there was this huge, development and proliferation of all these different legal AI tools. So there were really niche tools that did, point solutions that addressed a really specific use case in law. There were, more general tools that were getting bigger, like Harvey, Lagora, some of those ones. Then there were the kind of the even more general purpose that maybe weren't even law focused. And what we're seeing now, which kind of happens as industries get more mature, is there's some shakeout, some consolidation going on. And so that's been really interesting to see. And definitely at Legal Week, what I found so interesting kind of going around the floor at the Javits Center, which was, chaotic and fun and all those things, was that a lot of the tools that maybe started out as point solutions were thinking about ways to broaden their reach. And I think to me that really reflects, some changing industry dynamics that are, being pushed forward by the saturation of the industry. It got really crowded, and also by the technology, which, a lot of the costs in developing this tech, they've gone way down. You could spend a couple hours coding up your own legal tech tool, and attorneys are doing that now, which is fantastic. So the need for these, really niche point solutions is, maybe a little bit minimized in many cases. And so we're seeing that, a lot of the broader general purpose solutions are, expanding their reach, kind of encompassing what those point solutions were doing, honing their tech, and then also, to kind of I maybe jump ahead a little bit, but they're really finding that a lot of the maybe friction comes when it comes to sustained adoption and use. And so the tech is fantastic. The AI technology is really sophisticated and robust, and there are many, many use cases, but getting it to lawyers, making sure that they're actually using it, that they're transforming their work, that's kind of the hard part. And so that's something that I think there's, like a little bit of a reckoning going on in the industry, thinking about how we're going to do this at scale and sustainably.
Wait, you mean lawyers aren't embracing new technology and are stuck in their ways? Never
I
would
would
have guessed.
say, I would
Come
say
on.
so. I've been so impressed by how many lawyers are embracing new technology. There's, I think it was an associate at one of the big firms recently started like a whole consortium where in order to get in, you have to demonstrate, what you've built using OpenClaw or Tasklet or one of, the kind of code your own agent type thing. And so there's so many enterprising attorneys who are currently practicing see the writing on the wall and the way this is the way of the future. But I think at the same time, I don't want to, say that that's everyone. For every story I hear about an attorney who's, coding up their own agent, I hear a few more stories about, a smaller mid-sized law firm that doesn't have any AI at all. And so I think like kind of meeting, from our perspective at UnitedLex, where we are not a technology company, we specialize in services. We're so good at, providing these services. It really is an opportunity to kind of say, hey, we'll meet you where you're at. Some people are really sophisticated, some people aren't really sophisticated. We can kind of help both, I would say.
Yeah, I'll just add one thing to what Beverly said. I mean, I think that is going to become the evolution of new lawyers, is really going to be about how prolific and how proficient you are in using the technology that's in front of you. And that used to really, I came up in the litigation space, and that was something that was table stakes for us, 20 plus years ago. It's now encroaching on all practice areas. And I think that's a little different from how the practice of law has been, and I just think that that's going to change the way people are looking at new lawyers and how they're educating them, how they're bringing them up, who they're hiring in, is that there's going to be an expectation that you've built some proficiency and some, some
Absolutely.
fluency in these
No,
tools. And
100%.
yeah, and yeah, I think that will just be really, that's all I was just going to say is I think that's really important.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I also love your focus on implementation, not just implementation on use, right? Because it doesn't matter how amazing your tool is if nobody's using it, then you're just throwing money down the drain without getting any increased efficiencies. How do you see that? What have you guys seen as you've been implementing, across industry? What have you seen around adoption, and what are some of the major challenges that you're seeing? And maybe some of the biggest disconnects between like what they think it will do and what it's actually doing.
Yeah, I'll start, and I know Beverly will have a lot to add from her experience on the ground. But I really see this, if you don't take a step back and think about what you want the tool to do for you or what problem you're trying to solve, that's kind of a recipe for disaster. So I think where I see people be most successful is when they do think about going to market to look for new technology. They're actually looking at their whole process. How do I actually perform this legal work from soup to nuts, from beginning to end? Like if you have a contract, you have to think about, do I have a template I work from? I need to redline it. I need to negotiate it. I need to take it all the way through signature and then through its life cycle to renewal or expiration or whatnot. And I think the biggest misconception is that people will see a tool and say, oh, this is going to solve everything for me. And they just drop it in, and then all of a sudden they expect it to work like magic. And no one's really taken the time to do the change management, which is how does this tool fit into my overall business process? Is my current day business process even still the right one? Should I change it? Do I need a new target operating model? It's also, do I have the right skills? Like you may need different types of workers than you had on your team originally to make sure you're getting the most out of those tools. And so for me, it's really about taking that step back and building a change management plan. That is the biggest thing you can do as you're kind of envisioning how you want to adopt AI. And I know Beverly has a lot of passion about this topic. So
Yeah.
let's hear from her a little bit more.
Thanks, Renee.
Before you hop into that, Beverly, I'd like to say
Yeah.
that, I think that yes, 1,000% agree. I also think that before you even can implement a change management plan, you need to make sure that your workflows are mapped out properly, right? What
Yeah.
is the baseline before we even talk about what we're changing it to? And I'm sure, Beverly, this is exactly where you were going to start. So
That's
I'm
exactly
sorry.
what I was going to say.
Like, what are we even starting with, right? Like, what does it even look like? But sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to steal your thunder.
No, I mean, that's really, I completely agree. I would say that, a lot of what we're seeing now is almost like a kind of product manager type perspective on the innovation workflow and how law firms and legal departments are thinking about AI. So, you start with kind of mapping what you're doing currently and then matching that with, what resources you have, what capabilities you have, looking at your workflows, kind of what work are we doing? How is the work being done? Who's doing it? How long is it taking them? Just kind of all the questions that you would want to know about what's going on in your law department. And then, taking that information, including, all the resources you have, your governance structures around AI, like who needs to approve this, who needs to approve that, and then taking that and leveraging that into a plan. And you start to think about, hey, this might be a use case that we can, find a tool that can help us with this, or this seems like a product that we could build. We have the engineering resources, we have the time, we can just build it. So there's having that baseline of information, like a data collection phase basically allows you to then make all sorts of different, strategic and informed decisions about how you're then going to go forward with AI in your company or in your legal department.
Mhm. Absolutely, 100%. Where do you see, you know, like, do you think is this a technology issue, an expectation issue? Like, do you think that the implementation is the bottleneck, more so than the technologies and the people, the cult? Like, where do you really see these things at a high level? And just one more thing that has kind of occurred to me right now is, I think that improving the efficiency of legal operations is ideal from a client, from their client's perspective, but not necessarily from the firm's perspective, right? Where there's always this battle where they want to bill you for like internal meetings where they talk about your bill, right? And things like that, because then they get to bill you more. And so, they think there's that struggle where you're trying to deliver things more efficiently without reducing their billings overall, or how does that all kind of play and dovetail into this efficiency operations as you look at the legal space specifically?
I mean, on your last point, I think one thing that if we're talking about law firms, everybody is going to have to get more well versed in value-based billing and really thinking about the value of the outcome they're driving for their client. Because
Mhm.
it's no doubt, I mean, when you're trying to deliver AI-powered solutions, and as lawyers, there are ethical duties about billing by the hour and how you can bill and how you can mark things up. And there's some restrictions on that. And so you really have to think differently. You have to move away from the billable hour to really capture the efficiency and capture the value and still be able to be viable as a business. I think that's something that law firms and lawyers are going to have to think really hard about very quickly.
And just kind of adding to that about implementation and kind of where some of the tensions are, I would say that, the technology and in many cases the UX around that is not the bottleneck. It's the lawyers spending the time. And as you might imagine, in a law firm where, a partner's time is being billed out at, over $1,000 an hour, the incentive to start to take time out of their day to try to learn how to use something, any product needs to reduce as many frictions as possible to the attorney, like being able to use their product right away. But also there's, the other side of that is that the attorney needs to see value very quickly too. So I think it becomes a job of the innovation group at law firms to demonstrate that value right away, to help remove any of those frictions, and then where possible to try to incentivize the attorneys to use these tools, and whether that's by, FOMO, which lawyers respond to,
Mhm.
um, by I think there's other levers you can push, but sometimes, it really does involve like just spending a lot of time. And so I certainly have spent hours sitting with some senior partners at the law firm I was at, just walking through, how they would use XYZ legal AI tool to
Mhm.
improve, the tasks that they were trying to do. And so really, once then they see the value in it and you spend that time, then they're excited to use it in many cases. And the most validating thing and rewarding thing is hearing, like feedback from a partner that you spent like 3 hours with on like trying to get them to use something, and having them call you and be like, hey, I just used this to draft my voir dire questions. They came up with better questions than I would have come up on my own. That was fantastic. And so that's like there are rewarding points, but a lot of it is just, I'll call it white glove service, but it is like a slog. And so that's one component of it in the law firm space. In legal departments, obviously the incentives are a little bit different because, like you said, everyone wants to be more efficient in their work. I think there a lot of times, from what we've seen, there are some challenges around implementation that come from, data organization, just at a very basic level, where a lot of the legal department's data maybe is not very organized, and it's hard to, layer any sort of AI system on top of that, and get insights that are meaningful when like you're kind of pulling from, data that's not well organized. And so while people may be very incentivized to use it, kind of, laying out that roadmap a little bit more intentionally is something that we've seen can be really helpful to legal departments.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people don't either think about or know as it relates to AI. It doesn't matter whether we're talking like, like LLMs or like agentic solutions, or I mean, like we can talk graph models, retrieval systems, like
classification models, NLP pipeline. There's a whole bunch of different tools and methodologies out there that, are above and beyond the shiny objects in the room right now. But that's really like the last 5 to 10% of your data infrastructure, right? If your data is disorganized and messy and all over the place and not unified, and doesn't have, like some, kind of like ontology or taxonomy layer in there to structure all these data across all these different systems, like what do you like? You can't implement anything. Like you can't, well, not effectively. So what have you both seen, having obviously working across both in your own personal life, personal careers previously to UnitedLex, but also in UnitedLex, both in internal and either supporting like internal law firms or internal law departments or external law firms. Like, what do you see around like how good, well organized these data infrastructures really are for a lot of these firms and departments?
I'll start by just saying it's not even a risk of effective implementation. It's also the risk of data security that you're creating potentially another attack surface for yourself. And so it's beyond just being organized enough for the tools to learn off your data and be able to provide good output. It really is about kind of a data governance and a data protection mindset that needs to go into designing this. And I think when I've seen tools rolled out, without that forethought with clients. I've seen times when they didn't realize by pointing a tool in a particular direction what all was out there, that maybe they didn't intend to be exposed to the group that would have then been privy to the output. And so I think that's something that's really important. And I think most of us have been grappling with exploding volumes of data for years and years, and just trying to get better data governance. I mean, information governance has been a topic for decades now. And I don't think we've really made great progress, but this might actually be the impetus that gets people to start, like, this is the reason to invest when before maybe they couldn't find that motivation to invest.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm seeing certainly in more the corporate client set.
I completely agree with Renee. I think that, the risks associated with poor data governance are very real. And, a lot of people now, for example, are implementing Claude Code and Claude Desktop. And there are risks associated with that, especially for law firms, for example, or any, kind of entity that deals with multiple cases where Claude is not set up with ethical walls. And so that's something that, if you're implementing Claude, you really need to think thoughtfully about and being very, deliberate about how you're setting that up so that you're not violating client confidentiality in any way. And so that's something that I think is really important. And we're seeing a couple different approaches to kind of how companies and how people are going about kind of building in ethical walls while still wanting to incentivize all the experimentation that can come with Claude, which is wonderful. We've seen clients, on the legal department side where, for example, they want to take advantage, they want to have some sort of enterprise search capability. And their data, in SharePoint, for example, was not organized at all. The file names were all kind of, disjointed and no common system. And so what we can do is kind of go in, organize that all, and then allow them to layer AI on top of it so that when they, have so that they can do enterprise search essentially, and in a safe way that preserves kind of some of those preserves all of the ethical considerations and data privacy considerations that go into their system.
Absolutely. I also think that it's and this is something that I've heard from different folks, and I'd love your guys' thoughts on it. But I think that there's been a hesitation from a lot of like law firms to really heavily invest in infrastructure, right? IT infrastructure, because it decreases your profit per partner, because that's a cost, right? But you look at some of these large firms out there, right? And we all know the biggest ones out there, right? You know, if I was running like a hacking group someplace overseas in a place where I was trying to get information to blackmail corporations, I wouldn't go to the corporation. I'd go to I'd go to law firms and try to hack them because I'd figure that's going to be a softer target. You'd figure that like, like a DLA Piper is going to be a softer target than one of these massive, massive corporations. And then also, if you're able to get in, you get access to not just one corporation's data, you get access to a whole bunch of them. So I'm hopeful that we can, that this will also spur, especially with, some of the global instability that's happening right now as we've looked at things increasing. Um, Hopefully this will spur folks to do a better job of protecting their data as well. Either whether it's an internal law department or external on as a law firm to as they are going through setting up and looking to implement AI, setting up these new data infrastructures. How are we gonna like how are they gonna look at cybersecurity as well? How do you guys see that playing into things?
I think it's critical, and I think it has been critical. And I've actually seen law firms getting more mindful about security over time after I think we had some data breaches some years ago that kind of was the wake-up call for everyone.
Hmm.
And the corporate, those Fortune 500 corporate clients started really coming at their law firms the same way they approach their vendors, which is you have to pass my security audit, you have to reach my standards. So in some ways, I think the work's already been started there. But this is another attack surface. And so as you think about, yes, you're living up to your client's expectations, but I think law firms are going to have to be forward thinking and how do I exceed those expectations? How do I not wait for them to tell me what I should be doing? And how do I plan and do it well so that I'm not embarrassed by something or worse?
Also, how does that give me a competitive advantage in the marketplace, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Doing a better job protecting my data as a corporation, I'd probably more likely, if all the things are equal, I'd be more interested in working with you, as opposed to somebody that's not up to my standards. So what do you guys see? Are there any other things? I know we've touched on some of them around process and change management. Are there any other things that you see that separate like successful AI adoptions in the legal space versus those that stall out?
I think one thing you touched on it earlier, this kind of expectations versus reality. And I think people go in with because we're all seeing the marketing and you see the hype. And one of the really most important things that a client can do is really do a POC before they launch all the way into something and, do a light touch, light cost or no cost kind of POC to see, does the tool really do what it promises it will? And you can test that pretty quickly in a pretty limited environment. And then that will really give you that ability to project, okay, how is this really going to help me? What is my return on investment? That's a big question. I think people aren't always asking themselves. They're being pushed to adopt, pushed to go, pushed to go. And they're not kind of taking that moment, which, in corporations, we've always done that with every technology. We don't just like deploy something and let it run and go crazy. We've always taken, okay, let's do a pilot, let's measure, let's see what it did. And then if it's good, then okay, there's the toll gate. And now we fully implement. But I think there's been a little bit of that kind of initial gatekeeping step missing, which I know everybody wants to go fast and they don't want to be left behind. To your point about competition, you don't want to be behind your competitors. But I do think there's space for that pause to make sure that the decision that you've tested, that you've really looked at the return on investment, you've really looked at, is this going to do what it promises?
I think that there's what separates a lot of the successes from not so successful AI initiatives is kind of that planning and getting a really good sense of the work that you are trying to complement with AI. And I think that there's a lot of, at the first pass, you want to make sure that you understand the workflows and that the use case you're trying to automate is actually one that, is a good fit, basically. But then I think that you also want to make sure that, um, there's the use case being a good fit, but then you also want to make sure that the make or buy decision comes into play too. And I was going to say something else, but I totally forgot.
I understand.
I just had like a moment of,
It happens to.
sorry.
Oh, I totally get it. I forget what I'm saying half the time and just kind of
It'll
have.
come back to me. It's just
Oh, I
like,
know. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sometimes I'll start a sentence and I don't know where it's going to end. And,
sorry.
when I go, so it's all good. No, I totally get it. So I think one of the really interesting things another interesting thing that I've heard a lot about is around AI replacing lawyers or replacing like some of the tasks that lawyers cut their teeth on, right? Which is a big one, and I think that's the more subtle point. So, what are you guys seeing out there, and also having come up in as attorneys before this revolution took place? How do you see this affecting the next couple of generations of attorneys as they continue to come out of school?
So I've always seen the value that like really high value attorneys bring is they bring their relationships and their credibility. That is the most valuable work. And I would say their ability to predict how other people are going to react in a situation. It's like this human angle. And to me, those are things that are really still for a very long time going to be best left with the humans. Now, how do you teach your younger generation that's coming up how to do that? I mean, I think it's going to be about teaching them how to learn in the context of working with the tools at their disposal. At the end of the day, they're still going to learn because all of those things are learned through actual human interaction and experience. They aren't taught by reading a document and coding it as responsive or non-responsive. That's not taught by redlining a document. It's literally because you went and had an argument with the opposing side and you saw how that was going to play out. Or you went in front of a judge, made an argument, and saw how they were going to, think differently. So you're still going to learn through human interaction. You're just going to do it differently. Kind of the work leading up to that is going to be done differently.
Yeah, I would add to that. I still think that, we haven't reached AGI yet. And so to me, that still means that the relationship between AI and humans is very complementary. It's not a substitute for some things, but in the end, if you look net, it's a complement. The things that AI does really well are prediction tasks, and the things that humans do really well are judgment tasks, as Renee was saying. Um, a little plug for a book. That's not a framework that I came up with, but there's a really good book called Prediction Machines by some professors from the University of Toronto, Avi Goldfarb, Ajay Agrawal, and Joshua Gans. That's like a really good, very, accessible way to kind of understand what AI does and what it doesn't do and what humans still do, and kind of how that, complementarities and the complementary relationship still plays out. So I think that using that framework and leveraging that to think about, how we should go about using AI in legal work, to me, that's a really good framework for thinking about it in that you're not looking like when you map out a workflow, you're not looking at it as, this person does this deposition summary. I am going to one-to-one substitute the exact tasks that they're doing now with AI. It's you're looking to transform. So understanding, in order to do that, you have to understand what the AI can do, what it can't do, and then what the humans can do and what they can't do and what they're currently doing now. And so then kind of playing those back, together and looking, how can we transform this workflow, not just a one-to-one substitution, but kind of an entire transformation that will yield efficiencies across a number of different dimensions instead of just kind of the present dimension, the present workflow that you're working with today. So that's kind of how I think about it, really broadly. Specifically, I, think that Renee is right on and will, lawyers aren't going away. I don't think, but I do think that the work that they do will change and that will have ripple effects throughout the industry and will very much change kind of the legal industry as well.
Yeah, and I will say it's not that I don't think that technology can replace lawyers at some point. I mean, I do see there could be a time when you have, all the judging is done in this kind of, AGI level, and you can submit disputes, and then it's all very, democratically decided by, it's like everybody just kind of submits the evidence, and then a judgment is made. That may be the case. You may have contracts you can put into a tool and you put your side, and it pops out, here's the right answer. Everybody's cool with that. Everybody's cool with that. but I do feel like we see things or people talk about this as if it's like an overnight revolution that is going to just completely supplant humans. And I see it happening, a bit more gradually. Certainly, Nick, as you said earlier, in an industry with people who are kind of kicking and screaming brought into technology as it evolves.
Absolutely. Since you both brought it up, be really curious. What is your how do you both define AGI? What does that actually mean to you beyond like, just artificial general intelligence? Like what does that mean to you actually in practice?
I mean, that to me means that I can rely on a tool or a machine or software or whatever it is to make very human type judgments for me. That ultimately is what I would see that as being. And so anything that requires that kind of human judgment would be subject to that.
Mhm.
I would agree. I would say anything where, the AI is outperforming the human in terms of judgment. That's, I think, kind of how I think about it, but always open to learning more.
Well, no, I'm curious. The one of the things that I find really interesting is people always seem to measure it against humans, but how do you guys define human intelligence?
Wow, that's a great, well, I guess also get back to the AGI. I mean, it is kind of like a collective intelligence. That's what it should be at some point. But then you're right. At some point, it also then starts evolving beyond the collective human intelligence that it's sucked up into the the kind of the collective mothership. It has to kind of keep improving upon itself. But I don't know. I can get super philosophical about this. Like, does it need to have experiences of its own in order to build those judgments? Like, what does it do? Does it start, going out and kind of evoke, kind of embarking into the world and bumping into things and learning, oh, when this happens, the if-then consequences? I don't know. We
Yeah.
could
I'd
have
love to measure
another
it.
podcast on this. I'm saying that I'll get
I,
philosophical.
I love getting philosophical. That's why I asked the
Me
question.
too.
I'd
Mhm.
love to measure it against kind of, how do you think about human intelligence? I think humans, especially, I mean, if we're so focused on legal, um, and I think, lawyers are by and large very smart. And so I'd love to think about like, I guess I kind of benchmark my own definition of AGI on kind of, can it outperform a lawyer's judgment, like a good lawyer's judgment on kind of a given challenging sort of query? Um, so I don't know. That's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, no, one of the things that I've kind of thought about a lot as it relates to this is, like the kind of transitive inference where you're able to like if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C, right? And then also applying seemingly irrelevant experiences to new problems in ways in an inventive and creative ways that lead you to a different solution is something that I've always kind of thought about. Um,
Yeah.
I think one of the things that's really interesting is like AI learn every time it does a task, it's like it's doing it for the first time, right? You can store some memory in it, but like that gets wiped after a while. So like every time it drives a car, it's like driving a car for the first time. So um,
One thing kind of related to that that I think is interesting is that, a lot of the use cases that I've seen for AI and legal research are a little bit more limited, kind of addressing the example that you just brought up, which the goal in legal research many times is to find cases that support your argument or that you can, differentiate from that are similar to, but that you can differentiate your set of facts from to say like, oh no, this is not how you should rule because it's different. My case is different. And what I've seen is that the current legal AI tools that help with that don't do a great job. And so they can scope sometimes the universe of cases out there. Sometimes they don't even do a good job with that because I think they come up on this limitation of making the judgment about what set of facts are similar to your facts. and how you might distinguish from that, how you might say it's similar, and kind of, because you have to grasp the totality of the case, you have to grasp the totality of the law, understand whether there are updates. So there's a lot of different kind of, tasks within that, that I think just maybe it's a function of kind of how the tools are designed, and I'm not exactly sure. And maybe it's gotten better since I've looked at it, which it's been a few months now. But I do think that's something that, the legal research, which is a huge thing for lawyers, it's not quite there yet.
Yeah.
I think we see that too, just in other AI use cases where a lot of the engines are built to be people pleasers. Like they want to bring you the bone, they want to bring you the answer, and they want to say it definitively. I think about as a lawyer, as if I had an associate who's like going and doing the research and they come to me and they're like, yes, this is the answer. And I'm like, oh, great, good job. And then I go look at it and I'm like, wait a minute. And so I don't know, I think maybe we need therapists for our AI. I don't know, somebody to to help calibrate that, how positive do you want to be? Or that becomes, part of the, I know that does sometimes become part of the prompting, but that's important that it know what the goal is and when you're trying to send it on a task.
That's an excellent point about what the goal is, right? Because the goal of these tools, to be clear, and I'm talking about like the LLMs out there commercially, right? Specifically, is to drive user engagement, right? And let's be clear about it. Like, that's what their goal is, right? Their goal is to make you go back to it again and again and again and again and again to have more daily active users so that they can continue to raise money because none of them are profitable yet, right? And I'm talking about the standalone ones, right? Like the Anthropics, the Claudes, the OpenAIs, the ChatGPT, right? Those are not making money, right? I think that this is one case where like Google is way far ahead because Gemini doesn't need to be profitable for them to be profitable as a company, right? So you look at kind of the head. And also they have they have a massive infrastructure already built out within data centers and servers and, and compute that they can deploy in these, in this situation. But their goal is to drive engagement, right? And I think that it gets very, very, very dangerous when your goal is to drive engagement and you're working and you're using this tool to create work product in a very highly regulated industry that is very specialized, right? I know you guys remember the case. Oh, I want to say it was like 2 years ago or so, maybe 2.5 years ago, where some lawyer in New York got disbarred because they used ChatGPT to write their response to something, and all the underlying case law was just made up, right? Like it was just completely invented. And I think, so when you track the progress, like some like of these tools, like, yes, they are doing better now. Now they are no longer doing like now they're no longer hallucinating and largely creating, inventing cases entirely. But the case that they are citing might, not like it might be art, it might be and I'm forgetting the right words here. It might be proving the opposite point, right?
Yeah.
I can't lawyer that up enough though. If you guys want to take that one, please.
You know what? I prefer that. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
I
Sorry,
think
go ahead, Renee.
I know, I was just going to say, I mean, some states have reacted to that by putting in rules about when you're in court, you have to disclose if you've used AI at all in your process. Like I'm in Texas, and that's one of the things I remember getting that email from the state bar saying, guys, hey, this has come out. You need to be on top of it. That when you're going to court, if you used AI at all in any part of your case, you have to be talking about that. And so I think everybody's recognizing that we can use these tools, but we also have to be mindful and thoughtful and check the work, just like you would an associate. I would never take a brief or a memo an associate had written and hand it in and say, okay, this is it. I mean, you would always review that work. You would make sure you agree. You would make sure that you agree with the citations. I mean, I know this is the old school way of doing things, but in some ways, that's like the baby steps for people to think about, how to work carefully with these tools and not get caught in a problem like that.
I think that there was just a decision that came out on March 30th about um, using AI assisted litigation materials prepared via public AI tools. They're protected under Rule 26b(3) as work product and mental impressions. And using a consumer AI platform doesn't automatically waive that protection. But the court ordered that you need to disclose the name of the AI tools that are used. And so because the opposing party needs that information to assess whether confidential materials were compromised. So I think that is a kind of an interesting these things are being litigated right now. And I think that reflects the courts kind of being aware, to your point, Nick, that, there are like what are kind of the kind of broader commercial implications that we need to think about when we're using these things to, help us practice law. Kind of where are we, where are the biases in here that we might not be aware of, that might be built into the models themselves. There was also a really interesting New Yorker piece that just came out about Sam Altman and OpenAI, and it gets into some of the internal discussions at OpenAI, kind of exactly to your point, Nick, about, where and how are we drawing the line on, to what degree the model should be, trying to make the company money. Is it a nonprofit? Is it not a nonprofit? And I think those are really interesting things that do have implications for, the degree to which we leverage the output from some of these tools. So I think that's definitely interesting.
Yeah, and they're also active. I mean, like OpenAI is actively prepping for an IPO right now, and like
Right.
putting 26 or 20, which makes sense because that's of course that's what they're going to do, right? Because so it's, I mean, it may have started as a nonprofit, but it like they're not in it to not make, like they're in it to make money. Like we all know this. It's why Sam Altman had so much money before he even started OpenAI. That's also, he came out of the Zuckerberg school of thought in the tech space, I believe, about breaking things and figuring it out later. And I think that there's a lot of I mean, I have a lot of concerns around some of these things, right? Especially, I mean, like at the broader societal level, especially as you look at schools and school systems, and how like the unregulated rollout of cell phones and social media in schools have led to directly to first like reduced outcomes in school systems, but then also increased rates of mental health disorders among children. Like that's not a good thing, right? And so and I think AI as it continues to mature, because like we all know the AI we're using today, this is the worst it's going to be for the rest of our lives, right? As it continues to mature, build, and grow, I think it has a potential for more societal disruption than what we've experienced over the last 30 years. And so because of that, like I think we really need to be really cognizant and aware, cognizant, and like open-minded about what is going on and honest with ourselves about where we are and how things are going to continue to develop.
I tend to generally agree. I think that especially in education and legal education, or even just kind of higher education more broadly, I think the opportunity to really transform how we're delivering education and think, a little bit more strategically about what product is in education. And I spent some time in academia, so I've thought a lot about this, and I think that there's I would encourage people in academia and higher education to really think about what the value is that they're delivering, and how you would productize that, given that this technology is out there now, it's not going away. Like you said, it's only getting better. So like, how do we teach people to think critically, and to hone their judgment, given that we still have an opportunity to add judgment to a lot of work. How are we training people to be really good at that?
Hmm. Yeah. Renee, anything to add to that? You said you wanted to get philosophical.
Do I want to get philosophical? I had a thought and then it disappeared. I had a philosophical thought on this point and then it just like went right out of my brain when you asked me the question. But
No.
one thing that I will say, I think a lot about this, and we've hosted some talks with a professor that writes about this topic pretty often, Professor Richard Susskind. And one of the things that I've discussed, in context of those sessions is that as we're morphing the way everybody does everything in this world, and it's morphing at such a quick speed, our systems of governance and government are not really designed to go fast. And I think that's something that we all have to be mindful and like start thinking about how we solve that sooner rather than later. And just thinking about as we're sort of replacing jobs, that's one thing that I know is kind of people talk about what happens when you don't have jobs for these, kind of entry-level knowledge workers anymore. Like where do they go? How do we give them a path toward meaningful life and toward meaningful activity? And so this is something that it always worries me that these problems are evolving so fast and they're happening so fast and they're going to be upon us. I mean, they already are upon us, but I mean, it's just going to get worse. And yet our institutions are not built to move and solve problems that quickly, nor are we as a, 8 billion people, however many of us there are on this planet, it's a lot of people to try to get collectively solving a problem that's really going to affect us all.
Mhm.
So that keeps me up at night. Just how do we all kind of come together to make a future that's positive, and that we don't just let things happen to us, but that we're planning the future that we want to see.
I completely agree. And I think that there are, a number of different ways that we could think about, because I agree that our existing governance structures are really ill-equipped to manage and regulate a lot of AI developments. Um, and so I think that there are, but there's an opportunity, in legal to really, meet the moment and come up with, maybe whether it's regulatory markets or rethinking kind of legal infrastructure and the regulatory schemes that go into that. I think there's a lot of opportunity to really rethink how we're going to make sure that AI is used properly and that we are able to kind of have that complementary relationship as it continues to improve.
Yeah, I 1,000% agree. I think taking it a step further, I think we should be looking at, societal structures and like deciding which ones are still relevant, which ones aren't. Like, and I mean, as an example, right? Do you really need cops to enforce the speed limit anymore? You have a phone on you that knows how fast you're going and where you are at all times. And like, do you really need somebody to do that, or could you just like get a ticket automatically in the mail if you go over a certain speed, right?
I
Like,
thought we were going to have self-driving cars by now, so I was looking forward to that.
mhm. That would be
I mean,
cool.
I take Waymos all over Austin, so
yeah, I take Waymos too, but I wish that my home car was a Waymo so that I didn't have to.
Yeah.
right? A
Mhm.
chauffeur.
Yeah, and they just launched they're preparing to launch Waymo right now in DC, and I'm very excited about that.
Yes.
I want to try it and see, because I would love to get all that drive time back, right? Because that's time that you're out, you're doing stuff, you're going like, no, that'd be great if I could like sit and do things and right? But it's I don't know, I think it's fascinating. It's really interesting to kind of see where we're going, and kind of how things are going to continue to shake out. How I think you combine this technological instability with what looks like upcoming global change and global instability, right? With where we're sitting in the world right now, not to get political, but like, we can be real about that. You know, it'll be interesting to see where all this goes, and kind of how everything's going to get there. And but as we get ready to right, like any additional points you guys want to make before we get ready to wrap up, because I don't really have anything better that could beat this kind of societal philosophical conversation at this point. I'm not going to lie to you. This is the best I could do.
This is the
I would
fun
just,
part.
oh, go ahead.
No, I was just said this is the fun part of the conversation.
Mhm.
I like to talk about this kind of pie in the sky stuff. So
Let's go.
let's let Beverly close it because she'll have something great.
Mhm.
I no, I don't know if it's great. I just think that they're, rather than like glass half empty, glass half full, I would say that there's an opportunity. And there are these like big, meaty problems in the world. And to the extent that there's technology can help us solve them, I think that is an exciting opportunity and one that I hope people don't get too jaded about. And so I try and keep kind of a glass half full type perspective on this, that even when things, seem really grim, um, there are a lot of smart people out there. This technology is really awesome. Like, let's think about how we can use it to solve some of these big problems.
Yeah, 1,000%. I completely agree with you. I think the glass half empty versus half full thing is an interesting point. I just want to say the glass is probably the wrong size. You know. But yeah, this is super fun, guys. Last thing I want to ask you both is somebody that's listening that that is thinking or looking for help implementing AI services and things like that. Why should they reach out to you guys? Why should they reach out to UnitedLex and kind of what problems do you really think you can solve for folks overall at a high level?
Yeah, I'll give the high level and then Beverly, if you can go into the detail. So UnitedLex has been around for 20 years and we have served some of the world's biggest corporations during that time. And so nobody knows like we do how it is to deliver legal work inside of a huge business or being the law firm that supports those really large, complex businesses. And so whether it's litigation, it's intellectual property, it's contracts, it's compliance, privacy, all the things we do, we know how a corporate legal department operates. And so there's no one better that has that bird's eye view of how all those pieces have to interact to work together. And that's where our AI advisory practice is the new evolution of where we used to advise our clients on legal technology. Now we're very focused on how to empower them with AI.
Just to add to that, we've been delivering services for a really long time, and this is just kind of, as Renee said, the next iteration of that. What we're seeing, as we talked about earlier, with a lot of AI and implementation, is that it does come down to services delivery, and a lot of, that white glove support in making sure that use of the technology sticks. That's something that we're really good at, and that we can make sure that we are bringing that to clients in a really holistic way, starting from seeing where they're at, and all the way through kind of the implementation into a managed service. We're really good at services delivery, and that's kind of why we're so excited about this offering.
Absolutely. Really appreciate you both, Renee, Beverly. Really had a great time on the call with you guys. It's been super fun. Really appreciate you coming on Robots and Red Tape. Love to have you back at some point if you guys are interested. And to everybody out there, thank you so much for listening to Robots and Red Tape. You're the best part of this show, and I hope you're having a wonderful day.